I am a 29-year-old man married to 27-year-old Ava for 2 years. Havent. I was raised in a tiny town where most people went to the same neighborhood church and knew each other. We were raised in the same church as Ava's parents, having relocated there when I was 10 years old. After completing my undergraduate education, I made the decision to move back to my hometown a few years ago. It was then that Ava and I began dating, and I was already accustomed to the simple, quiet, and serene life there. After years of crushing on her, my chance finally arrived. After a year of dating, we were married because we were so in love. When Ava and I got married, the church and our parents were happy, and they even helped with our modest wedding. The fact is, prior to our wedding, Ava and I never had a romantic relationship. When all of my attempts at convincing her to wait until our wedding night failed, I gave in to her demands. Ava stayed completely devoted to the church and attended all of the events, meetings, and programs, in contrast to me, who wasn't as involved. Every weekend, she would go out with the church team to pray and preach to people. She was even a member of the evangelism team. She never consented to spend the night at my house when we were dating, and we could just kiss each other. She said it was against God's will for us to do it before marriage, and that she was reserving herself for me. I believed Ava was a virgin for the entire time I waited for us to get married and eventually share a sexual encounter. I assumed she was because she never told me she wasn't. I learned that she wasn't until the evening of our nuptials. She had been engaging in this behavior with her past partners, but she made the decision to cease and start again. I tried not to let the disappointment destroy our new marriage, but it took me some time to get over it. She was courteous and treated me nicely, aside from learning that she had previously dated other men, if it was a sweetheart, which she had not before disclosed to me. She was also exceedingly hospitable to strangers as well as those she knew, exuding a calm and upbeat attitude. In order to have enough time to fulfill God's work, Ava chose to be a stay-at-home wife, and I worked as a driver for a logistics firm. I was striving to keep the errands going in addition to my paycheck, despite my meager pay. The church paid Ava a stipend for her humanitarian work. She paid for her necessities with that money. I thought Ava's devotion to the religion would wane once we got married so we could concentrate more on starting our family. The fact that she stayed home and did nothing bothered me not at all. I had anticipated that we would be together a lot, but that was not the case. She attended church almost every day. Assumed she wasn't attending a midweek religious service. If that were the case, she would be attending departmental meetings, evangelism events, or any other daily church-related activities. She would go to church virtually every evening, so most of the time it would get to the point where we wouldn't even get to spend time together. She would simply eat and go to bed by the time she got home in the evening. Ava would leave the house early on the weekends to attend meetings, volunteer work, or other commitments. She would return in the afternoon, only to depart again and come home late. I berated her for not spending time with me and for being unduly devoted to her church, but each time I confronted her about it, she told me that I should have known better than to ask her to marry me. She always answered like this. Every time she said it, she would turn her back on me. Whenever I complained, we would fight, and thereafter, she would stop talking to me for 2 or 3 days. We discussed having children months before we were married, and we intended to start a family at least a year into our union. We hoped to utilize the first year to get to know ourselves since we weren't that close while we were dating, but so far, that hasn't worked out well. A year had passed, and Ava was a completely different person. I didn't think the marriage would turn out the way it did, and she wasn't the Ava I knew when we were dating. It wasn't like we had a lot of problems. Her constant attendance at church and how it affected our marriage were the only things bothering us. I could always complain, but she would never listen. I was unable to accompany her for the midweek services and the remaining programs due to the nature of my work. I would rather spend my time doing other things, even when I had free time. She made it seem as though I was the devil and that I was attempting to persuade her to reject God every time I complained to her. However, it was not the case. All I was attempting to do was ask her to reduce the amount of events and schedule more time for us. I decided to talk to her about it after a year had gone by, and we still hadn't had a child. But she didn't seem interested. She openly informed me that I was preoccupied with having children and that she was too busy serving the Lord, and I should be supporting her instead. At that time, I had had enough of her habits and reported her to her parents. I filled them in on everything Ava had been up to, including how she had ignored the house, me, and her duties as a wife. Her parents were taken aback to hear that. That's how Ava behaved. Ava confronted me a few days after I told her parents about her. Because I reported her to her parents, she became so enraged that she even called me names and insulted me. I regret not leaving when her changes in neglect began as I tell this story. I considered that many times, but I ignored her carelessness and deafened to all of her abuse because I loved her, and I continued to advocate for us to work things out. I still loved Ava and treated her with affection in spite of her erratic behavior and her purported failure to use me for the Lord's mission. She was rarely home to take care of the house, so I cleaned most of it. Along with cooking and cleaning, I also went food shopping and took care of other household chores. We carried on in this manner for an additional year, but towards the end of the second year, she became pregnant. When Ava revealed that she was expecting, I was overjoyed. I anticipated that as her pregnancy progressed, she would attend church less frequently, and that is precisely what transpired. She was still extremely busy and went to church during the beginning of her pregnancy, but starting in the second trimester, she started to stay at home. Ava's pregnancy problems and the doctor's advice to avoid stressful situations were contributing factors to her inability to attend church consistently. Rather than continuing to attend church activities, Ava's church mates started paying her visits. They would come in groups on certain days, while some folks would come by themselves on other days. They would almost always bring gifts, fruits, and other snacks to satisfy Ava's appetites when they visited. Ava was very committed to her faith, so I wasn't shocked by their outpouring of love and care. Apart from the churchgoers who came to see us often, most families had known her since she was a young child and loved her as their own. Our church pastor was another individual who regularly visited her home. He was the one who usually brought Ava gifts and fruits. Ava usually had this glow and enthusiasm on her face whenever our church pastor came, but I didn't think anything of it. Sometimes I would leave him at home to go purchase something or take care of things outdoors, but most of the time I would come home from work in the evening to find his car parked in our driveway. Since he was our pastor and Ava would never do anything with him that didn't please God, I thought there was nothing to worry about. Our pastor would visit our home every few weeks and would always bring things for Ava. I kept up my job as a driver for a logistics company and worked an evening shift. Ava's pregnancy required a lot of adjustments at home, and there were more demands. I had to be really accommodating and fulfill all of her requests. She was the reason I didn't always sleep properly certain nights. She needed enough sleep, therefore I had to take care of everything even though it greatly hurt me. One thing that always jumped out about the days our pastor visited Ava was how much money he would generally give her. I assumed he was just being kind when it happened during his first visit. But when it kept happening, I started to have doubts. I didn't think it was appropriate for Ava's pastor to give her that much money each week. Ava told me I was making a big deal out of it, and that her pastor was just assisting her the way he would help anybody else when I asked. However, she informed me she would cease receiving money from him after a few arguments. Although I had a part of me that warned me something was wrong, I still wanted to believe her when she said her pastor helped her like he would anyone other. I started to feel uneasy about our pastor visiting her as he went on. As they drew nearer, I was aware that there were several topics they avoided talking about with me. When her pastor came to visit one afternoon, I recall offering to make him some fresh juice. I went to the living room and left him and Ava. They were whispering about something in the hallway as I made my way back from the kitchen. However, they immediately pretended to be speaking in their regular voices as soon as I entered the living room. Another occasion, our pastor left as soon as I walked into the house after I got home from work. I was uncomfortable, and I kept getting the feeling that something wasn't right. My suspicion was confirmed when I noticed that Ava acted differently that evening after our pastor left. I had assumed that skepticism would be something I could put behind me, but it kept coming back whenever I saw Ava and Pastor together. Ava also stopped telling me about the amount of money she received from our pastor and began hiding it after I voiced my complaints about it. Had I not discovered the wad of cash while cleaning one of her linen drawers, I would not have realized she continued receiving money from her pastor. She had been lying to me, which disappointed me even more than it astonished me. She led me to assume she had given up on receiving payment from her pastor. I knew that confronting her about the money would greatly increase the likelihood that I would discover the truth about their relationship. She told me that our pastor had prayed for her and the baby numerous times, and it was primarily what brought him to her home. However, I was still unsatisfied with that explanation. I then made the decision to purchase those little cameras that are simple to install in your home without being seen in order to figure out what was going on. I arranged them in our living room in such a way that they could cover every corner. I also stored 2 in the kitchen, 1 in the bathroom, and 1 in our room. By now, I was very sure our pastor was taking money from the church and giving it to Ava to keep for himself. I thought this was the only reason our pastor was giving her such a large weekly payment. But I had a huge surprise in store. 2 days after I set everything up, our pastor stopped by the house. I left work early that day since I knew he would be at her place, and I parked close to my house. I had planned to confront them once I had seen and heard everything. However, everything that followed took a different turn as a result of what I witnessed. I was checking my phone's footage of my house as I was driving. I watched our pastor walk inside my house, and he started to unbutton his shirt after getting confirmation from Ava that I wasn't home. Ava, on the other hand, had nothing on underneath her pink bathrobe. She removed her bathrobe and showed our pastor her entire body. As I watched the video, my heart skipped a beat because I knew what was going to happen next. What I was seeing was beyond anything I could have imagined, and I could hardly believe it. I was at a loss for what to do, but hearing Ava's sigh with pleasure drove me crazy. I couldn't even recall getting out of my car and sprinting home. I threw open the door and leapt on our pastor because I was so furious. I vented to Ava's pastor because I knew I couldn't touch her due to her pregnancy. The pastor might have fainted if Ava hadn't stepped in. I was so broken-hearted that I was at a loss for words. Clothes in his arms and only his underwear on, he hurried out of the house. Ava started crying like a remorseful little baby when he departed. She claimed her pastor had come to pray for her and the baby, and it wasn't what I had assumed. When I caught Ava red-handed lying to me, like her pastor was doing to her, I could not believe she was still trying to lie to me. I tried not to become too upset even though I was furious. It dawned on me then that Ava had been having extramarital affairs with our pastor, which explained why he continued to give her money. She denied having anything to do with our pastor when I asked how long her romance had been going on. She wouldn't accept it, based on the way she was acting, so I ejected her from my home. Her bathrobe and flip-flops were all that was on her. Ava persisted in asking me to let her inside the house until the neighbors arrived to inquire about the situation. Fortunately for Ava, one of them offered to drive her home, so that's how she made her way out. I made sure to phone her parents first, and let them know what I had witnessed before she got to their house. When Ava arrived at her parents' place, her folks started blowing up my phone because they didn't think I was telling the truth. I was in no mood to converse, so I declined their calls. I haven't been able to think clearly since all of this happened 3 weeks ago. I can't stop thinking about Ava, and it hurts so much that even though I tried my hardest to be a wonderful spouse to her, she cheated on me by seeing our pastor. I'm at a loss right now on what to do and am really puzzled. I've always wanted us to raise our kids as a married couple rather than as divorced parents. However, I am unable to put up with a liar. No, I haven't yet revealed her infidelity to the church. Our pastor has been texting me, requesting that we get together and discuss, and she and her pastor have been phoning me every day. Oh my op, I'm very sorry. She turned over a new leaf, but it did her no good at all. She was such a hypocrite. You know, on her knees for something other than God? By the sound of it, she had been having an affair with the pastor for a while. The biggest red flag of all was when you discovered she wasn't a virgin despite her constant preaching about being. flawless and clean. People like her, 9 times out of 10, don't really do what they preach. Regretfully, she is concealing her immoral actions under her faith. First update. I appreciate your feedback. You're all set. I should have known better than to ignore the warning signs when they first appeared, yet I persisted in clinging to our marriage. So, I met her pastor at church 2 days ago on a Sunday. Just as some of you had indicated, it was an open space. Ironically, he was trembling that morning when he saw me enter the chapel. I had not attended church for 5 weeks, so when he saw me, he became afraid. He summoned me to his office after the service and pleaded with me not to tell anyone what I had seen. He was smarter than Ava, at least. I took advantage of the chance to find out how long he and Ava had been seeing each other. Guys, guess what? He mentioned that it was before to Ava and my dating. In other words, he had been having this conversation with her while she was lying to me. When I found out that Ava had not only cheated on me but also made a fool of me, I was absolutely destroyed. I wanted to face him, but there were too many people in the church for me to do so. I kept my cool since I knew that my confrontation would spoil my plans for him. Although I was hoping to see Ava at church as well, she wasn't present. Not even her parents showed up. I had heard whispers of our pastor abusing the church's young girls before I met Ava and her pastor, but no one was brave enough to confront him about it. It was obvious at that time, so I didn't even need to question if he had been spending church funds. I suppose he used the weekly gifts from the church to meet his necessities. Our pastor begged me to keep his affair with Ava a secret, and I agreed to overlook it as long as he said no. He would also admit to the congregation that he had been utilizing church funds for his own expenses. It surprised me that he agreed to my plan to discipline him. He promised to make the announcement and seek for forgiveness from the congregation the following Sunday. I knew in my heart that he was lying. Unless he had a hidden agenda, he would never consent to humiliate himself in such a way. Ava called on a different number just yesterday. She had been calling for the past few weeks till I blocked her. She claimed to have visited my residence multiple times, but that nobody had answered. 3 days after I had ejected her, I packed up and left the house, because I could not shake the image of them in my living room. She argued that I should give her another chance to prove that she has changed and that she didn't want to raise the child alone. Hee. She is unaware of what is ahead for her. I informed her that I could only assume parental responsibility for the child in the event that a paternity test was performed and the findings confirmed my fatherhood. After we do this, I'll post another update. I appreciate all of your feedback. I believe you are correct. The pastor would never, ever confess his transgressions to the congregation and ask for forgiveness. Even if your wife claims to have changed, she still believes she should be given another opportunity at everything. No, she hasn't. After a few days, she hasn't changed in the slightest. Her diabolical ways have just begun. Were eventually discovered. That they made the church the scapegoat is regrettable. The preacher used his position to further his nefarious intentions. I apologize to Opie. Update 2. Hello to all of you. I am so grateful to this community for all of the support that I have received. I also regret that it took me weeks to provide this update. Ava declined to take the paternity test when I told her about it, but her parents persuaded her to. They said that I was being challenging and that I intended to make her life unpleasant. She probably thought I wasn't the baby's father. When the paternity test was finally conducted, I was found not to be the baby's father. I had a sneaking suspicion that this would occur as soon as she objected to the paternity test. When her parents learned, they were devastated and asked her who was in charge of her child. Not that she could respond to them. I informed them that it was the same preacher since I knew who it was. You don't have to inquire if I was heartbroken because I couldn't have expressed how I felt. On the day of our church's midweek service, we received the test results, so I made the decision to pay our pastor a brief visit. I contacted a lawyer to process Ava's divorce papers because, even though the baby was mine, I had already made the decision to divorce her. By the time of the confrontation, everything was prepared. I went directly to the front of the church and grabbed everyone's attention as soon as I arrived. I asked for the microphone, but our pastor, who was preaching, wouldn't give it to me. He was aware of my purpose for being there and kept blinking to tell me to stop, but I disregarded him. I started talking loudly so that everyone could hear me when he refused to give me the mic. Everyone gasped in shock as I revealed our pastor's deception and gave them the whole truth. Since I knew there was no way I could display the video to everyone, I instead played the audio recording of our pastor's admission that he was having an affair with Ava and was using church funds for personal expenses. I didn't inform him, or he didn't realize that I had recorded our talk that day. I shared that audio tape with multiple social media groups affiliated with my church. It was all in the look on his face when he learned about the recording. I surprised him by recording our chat, so if he tried to refute what everyone had heard, I had ample proof. All of that, I was certain, would be sufficient to destroy his marriage, and it did. He was demoted because the church was so disappointed in him. The church also lost a great deal of members since they were aware of our pastor's reputation as a virtuous guy who consistently preached against sexual immorality. They were therefore disappointed to learn that he wasn't even living up to his words. Regarding Ava, despite all of her pleadings and sobs from her and her parents, we have decided to divorce. She is currently living with her parents despite being so close to giving birth, even though she is very disappointed. Even so, her parents adopted her. As soon as I revealed her pastor, I also stopped attending church. The story has gone quickly around the town, as I had anticipated, and practically everyone is talking about it. Ava has already lost a great deal of friends and supporters. It was a fair partner the last I heard about it. I was told that when he became the pastor of her church, his wife had filed for divorce and that he had been ordered to produce documentation of every dollar he had spent on church-related expenses. It's obvious how that will end. Even though Ava's adultery still hurts and pains me, it's better than being married to a liar. I appreciate all of your support up to this point. I am grateful to each and every one of you. Opie, you made the correct decision. Bravo for sticking it to the man. It was right that everyone knew where that money was going. I feel that he doesn't deserve to be in that position, when so many people hold such high regard for him. I wonder if having his wings removed damaged him. How do you feel? We appreciate you coming here today,